Okay.
Yeah, started. I've started.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Gilmore, and I'm a director on the Forge platform team. My primary role is to help make decisions around what APIs we expose to our customers and partners for building applications on top of Forge. And today I'm going to do a repeat of a presentation that I did at the Forge DevCon at Autodesk University in November of last year. I've made a few tweaks to that, just based on some of the changes that have happened between then and now. Some of the APIs, for example, are now in beta that I was talking about we hadn't released yet. And like Steven said, if you have any questions, please, type them into the question and answer console. If there's something that they think I should answer more generally, I'll just answer it during the presentation. Thanks. So first of all, just wanted to say that I'll be talking about some things here that are futures and things may change. So keep that in mind when I talk especially about the section about our futures and what APIs are in beta. Some of those could change depending on what our roadmaps look like. So let me start a little bit about why we're even working on some of these APIs for Forge. And I think the interesting part is the way we are constructing buildings these days and designing buildings, the way we're manufacturing things, and especially the way we're collaborating today is significantly different than it has been in the past. And one of the things we really wanted to be able to do with Forge was, I would say, almost unlock the information that we have in all of our design tools to start powering more than just the design process, but letting people that need access to data either during construction, manufacturing, or during even collaboration during the design process, or even operation of the equipment or buildings that people are designing, manufacturing, and constructing. How do we get that information shared out there, and how do we provide APIs that let them take that information and embed it into their applications for just about any kind of workflow. And so some of the APIs that I'm going to be talking about today are really focused on two areas. So one is, the digitization of the construction site. There's something like the investment in mobile devices on the construction site has far exceeded even the investment in desktop and laptops, for example, that people are using in their offices. And we want to be able to let people take advantage of the fact that they have those mobile computers in their hands on the construction site. The second one I'll talk a little bit about is what we're doing around the sort of factory floor of the future and optimizing not just how you might be able to manufacturing stuff, but how your customer can participate in a process of potentially configuring what they buy from your company, and how you present your products to your customers, and then how that can actually reach right out into the manufacturing floor. So let's start first, though, on the construction side and talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing on that side. So first of all, one of the things that we kind of looked at is we looked at sort of what are the, high level areas in construction and pre-construction, that our customers have expressed interest in Autodesk having solutions for. And so what we first kind of looked at is, what are the things that we are doing as a company? So if you look here, our BIM 360 product line has a few of these areas like class detection, has a common data environment, construction and field management. It has those capabilities built into the product. But we wanted to be able to make sure that some of these other gaps and some of these other areas that we weren't having capabilities of the product in yet, we enabled partners to be able to do that. And so what you'll see here sort of in this orange area is these are areas in which we have been working with partners to fill in the gaps. And where Forge comes in is Forge has the APIs on top of our products, not just as individual web services, to be able to go in and get access to things like the data, the files that are in BIM 360, the metadata that are in those files, understanding what's going on, creating projects and folders, all those kind of things. It has those APIs in there that'll let you actually go ahead and do that. Just to give you an example, we've got something like 50 partners now that have built applications on top of BIM 360 using our Forge data management API. One of those partners is a company called Trex. Trex does safety alert systems. So for example, you have this little wearable that you clip onto your belt, and if it has a sensor on it, and it can tell your location in the construction site at any time. So if some kind of an incident happens, as a customer, you could get a view of the construction site and where all your workers are and who might be affected by that particular incident. Trex was kind of interesting because they had a solution already that worked, but they wanted to have something that was a little bit more interactive. And for some reason, my video is not playing. Stephen, do you know why the videos wouldn't play on GoToWebinar?
I have no idea. Sorry.
That's interesting.
Work.
Yeah. You know what? It has something to do. That's okay. It has something to do with sharing the screen. They do not want to work. All right, I'll talk through that. So what Trex has done is they've used a couple of our different APIs to be able to go in and take advantage of the fact that we have Revit models and Revit data in BIM 360. And what they're able to do is they're able to go in and grab, for example, all of the 2D drawings out of the Revit models and use those as maps to be able to now show where the workers are located, within the application. The second thing they've done is they've taken the 3D representation of that and are doing the same kind of thing. So they've chopped the model up by floor. And when you go into their Trex software now, you can not only see in a 2D representation where workers would be within zones of the construction site or floors, within the building, you can see that in a 2D or 3D representation as well. So they're able to take something that was sort of like a scanned PDF workflow into a very high fidelity, accurate workflow of what's going on in the construction site and where workers are actually located. The other one that's kind of interesting is our reality capture API. So if you had looked at Forge before, you would have seen the reality capture API was in beta last year. So now it's a fully released API. The reality capture API basically has had a significant amount of improvement based on a lot of that beta feedback. And this is a great example of why getting involved in the betas or APIs is great. So initially, the accuracy was only limited to 500 photos. So you can only take 500 photos and generate 3D mesh models or point clouds out of those. We got a lot of feedback from customers saying, "Hey, I really need to be able to input more photos to get the accuracy that I want." So now we actually can take up to 1,000 photos to be able to get a high level accuracy of images. The second thing that we've done, again, based on that feedback, is done ground control points. So if you're flying your UAV over and taking pictures of, for example, a site, you can mark a ground control point of a known location, and then that will help geographically locate that model that comes out of the calculation of photos to 3D mesh and give you an extremely accurate representation of not just the model physically, but also the model geographically. So you can start locating other assets in relation to that model. Of course, that model that gets generated out of the Recap API, like I said, can be either a full 3D textured mesh like the one you see here in the picture, or it can be a point cloud data, and it'll go into any of the Autodesk products, like the Recap Web, Civil 3D, InfraWorks, Revit, or Autodesk BIM 360, or any other application that can take the 3D mesh or point cloud formats. So that API is fully released now and ready to use. I wanted to also talk a little bit about security and compliance. Autodesk has had a pretty significant investment here based on, again, a lot of feedback from our customers. And there's really 4 areas that we're working in right now. So SOC 2 compliance. You remember, compliance is an area where it's really about, do you have the right kind of processes and procedures in place to make sure that you can keep things secure. It's not about technical security, let's just say. It's about a sort of security and compliance is more about, do you have the right processes in place and the right process in place for both preventing security breaches and also, if one happens, taking action on that security breach. That's what a lot of it is about. So SOC 2 is a common one out there globally. We've got several of our services, for example, our storage services, our model derivative services, today, and even if products like BIM 360 and Fusion Team are all SOC 2 compliant today. We also have always had the ISO 2701 compliance. EMEA model clause compliance is something that we added last year. And this year we're adding GDPR. So GDPR is a general data protection set of regulations from the European Union. And it has more to do with the ability that if a customer wants to delete information off your systems, you have a traceable path that can both delete that information and then prove to the customer that you've done that. So that's some of the work that we're going to continue to do on compliance this year. More services will get SOC 2 compliance. Essentially, we do SOC 2 compliance audits every 6 months and add new services, in that time period. The other thing we did was we did some tweaks to our business model. We used to have, an ability to do a $500 a month subscription that you could do each month. What we've done now is, instead of doing that, we still have our trial. Trial's free. It starts with 100 credits now, and 5 gigabytes of storage. Essentially, once those 100 credits run out, all you really need to do is buy more. So instead of giving a set price for each month or a set amount of credits that you need to buy, you can just go buy whatever number of credits that you need for Autodesk Forge. Now, what those credits are used for is each of the APIs have a rate in which they consume those credits. So, for example, if you're using the model derivative API, which goes in and converts, for example, a Revit model into something that can be viewed in our viewer, then that's 1.5 credits. If you were to want to convert a bunch of DWGs to be able to be viewed inside of our viewer, you can convert 5 of those for a credit. And so those set prices are something that's on our pricing page at forge.autodesk.com, and you get 100 of those to start out with. And once you run out of those, you can just start buying more as you need them. We also have a path that if all you're doing is really integrating with our Autodesk cloud products, so for example, let's say you own Fusion Team or BIM 360, or you're building an app for one of those products, you don't really need to use any of the consumption APIs to go and build apps for those products. So you can sign up for getting free access to just the APIs that let you integrate with those products. That's for example, the BIM 360 API and the Forge DM API give you access to all the data that you need for Fusion Team, BIM Team, and BIM 360 docs. So those APIs, you can get free access to those just by going and getting started. If later on you decide that you want to use some of the consumption APIs, like the Design Automation API or the Reality Capture API, or the Model Derivative API, you can just sign up to use those and add those into your access for Forge. So what do we got under construction, or what are we working on? Let's talk a little bit about that. Well, the first thing that is now in beta that we've been working on is our API for Webhooks. Now, this is an API that, again, came from customer feedback. What customers were saying is, hey, I really need a way that when events happen within, some of the APIs that you have today, that I get notification in my application so that I can go react to that event. Webhooks is not a mechanism that Autodesk created. It's a common mechanism out there in the market. It's this idea of, an application posting a message to a URL when some kind of an event happens. There are many different types of implementations of webhooks out there that people leverage this technology. You can also, if you have a webhooks implementation, you can integrate with a lot of other services that will, accept the notification to do different things. So for example, if you want to do something where in BIM 360, as a file changes, let's say, for example, a new version gets created, you want to send a Slack message to somebody, or you want to send a text message to somebody, those kind of things are fully possible. It's pretty simple the way it works. So think of your application here on the left-hand side of the screen, and Autodesk Cloud applications, or on the right-hand side of the screen, and the Webhooks API. What you do is you go in and you subscribe to some actions in the Webhooks API. When those actions happen, and for example, let's say BIM 360 docs, they will go ahead and send a message to a URL that you provide. Your application is monitoring that URL. It takes action based on the information it receives, and whether that be in your case, let's say a new file version gets created, and you want to go and download that file and do something with it, you could do that. Or you want to kick off some other process when that new file version gets created, you could go ahead and do that. I do apologize. I don't know why the videos are not working here, but this is a sample app that is fully available to you guys. Stephen or Guru can provide the information where you can get a hold of this. The idea here is this was just a sample app that we created to demonstrate how you could actually use webhooks. So in this case, you'll see the webhook events here on, you'll see, first of all, you see a set of folders. So this is using the data management API to go and peruse a BIM 360 project. Then you'll see in the second area here, you'll see some of the events that are available in the Webhooks API. So you see, for example, files and versions and folders and different actions that could happen that you could subscribe to. And then in the sample, what it'll do is you can provide it with either a mobile number, an email address, or a Slack service hook. And essentially what it'll do is whenever anything changes, in that particular project, it will send an SMS message to the cell phone number, it'll send an email to the email address, and it'll send a Slack message to the Slack service that you provided for it. That's just an example of how you can integrate with other systems. Now, your application could do the same thing if you want to subscribe to those same kind of events as well. Other APIs that we're working on, this is particularly focused on BIM 360 itself. There's really a set of 4 here. I've talked a little bit about RFIs and issues here. So we're working on an API for the RFIs and issues within BIM 360 docs. It'll do common things like being able to figure out what issues exist, creating new ones, attaching objects or files, anything that you want to an RFI if it's created, statuses, due dates, all those kind of things that you would expect. Even down at the object level. So if you were trying to create a workflow inside of a model where you wanted to be able to go and create a new RFI or issue and assign that to a particular object inside of a model or 2D drawing, you'd be able to do that as well. Take a photograph, for example, and assign that to a particular object inside of a 3D model would be a good example of something like that. So that API is being worked on right now. I expect that sort of in the first half of this year. I would say that API will be released. Once it starts to get out in towards beta, though, we'll be sending out information in the Forge newsletter. That's a newsletter that we send out every month. If you have opted out of marketing information, that's essentially the marketing information we send if you opt in. But if you opted out of that, you won't get that newsletter, but you can check out our blogs, the Forge blog, so a lot of the information goes up on there as well. The other API that is in what we call a private beta right now, so it's sort of an invite only versus a public beta, which is available like the Webhooks one up on forge.autodesk.com right now. This is the new design automation APIs. So if you're not familiar with the design automation API, today we have a design automation API for AutoCAD. That's an API that lets you basically create, edit, and publish using the AutoCAD engine. So for example, if you want to create a new DWG, if you want to edit an existing DWG or publish, to a PDF file, let's say, for example, a DWG, the design automation API is basically a headless AutoCAD running on a server that you can do any kind of interaction that you could do within AutoCAD on that particular API. We're coming out with versions of that for Revit, Inventor, and 3ds Max. So think of those same kind of things. If you have a Revit model and you want to be able to modify it in some way, so think of a combination here. So let's say that you're using, BIM 360 docs. Somebody adds a new version of a Revit model into your project. Maybe it's coming from a partner that you're working on or a contractor that you're working with, and you want to be able to do a model check on that model to make sure that it meets the standards that you have, or maybe naming conventions, things like that. You could go in and grab that model out of BIM 360. You could do a model check on it, make any changes that you need to make on that model, and then save it, upload it back into the project as potentially a new version if that's what you want it to be able to do. Or another example is you want to be able to create families automatically and generate those families based on some criteria. Maybe you've got a website that you want to be able to use. You have somebody fill in some information, and then you want to use the Revit engine to go generate a set of Revit families for that content. Think of the same kind of thing with Inventor, having the Inventor engine available to you, being able to create, edit, and publish Inventor models, doing things like simplification of models for building product information, or even configuring a model based on parameters. If you want to be able to drive the parameterization of a model, through a mobile device or web page and have it created and get that result back, you'll be able to do that pretty easily with that API. And then 3D Studio Max, same thing, and same kind of pattern here. You're going to see all those be the same. The difference is that for each of those, you might take advantage of the capabilities. So, Max is more likely to be used in workflows where you might want to try to do storytelling and AR, VR type things, or high-end renderings where you want to do something based on somebody going ahead and using Max as the engine to be able to make changes either to Max files or be able to do some renderings based on the Max engine. You'll be able to do those kind of things. These APIs are right now, like I said, in private beta. I'll provide an email address at the end of the presentation that you can send in if you're interested in being part of that. So let's see. Unfortunately, the videos are not working. So there was 2 videos here that I was going to show. One was reaching into BIM 360 docs, grabbing a model, inserting creating a staircase inside of it, and then obviously showing that was created through the large model viewer. And then the second one was just showing how you could reach in and just do that independently. This is a one that a customer wrote on the Inventor one. Essentially, Inventor, when it goes in and creates a thread, for example, in a 3D model, it uses an image to create that. And so what they did is they used the Inventor engine. They took some code that they had written a sample on inside of Inventor, or sorry, an application inside of Inventor itself, and they used that to actually do the same kind of thing with the Inventor web service through the Design Automation API. So they can take any kind of thread like this shows here in this picture and generate a real thread from it, in the actual model that is a fully modeled thread. But just examples of how you'll be able to use some of those APIs when we release that. Same thing on the timing for those APIs. I expect those to be, probably in the later half, so more towards the middle of this year, those will be released. We'll add, we have just a few beta customers right now, just a handful on each of those, and we'll start adding more probably in the March timeframe is when we'll start really starting to ramp up on the number of people that are in those betas. The other one that we've been working on is an AR/VR toolkit. This is what we call a sample SDK. So the source code is available for anybody. I think right now it's not quite posted on GitHub, but it will be soon. It is available though if you want to play around with it. This toolkit, the idea is that it's about preparing content for for VR, and it's about using Forge as the engine to be able to do that. Because Forge Model Derivative Service has this ability to take in something like 65 different file formats and bring those into a browser or mobile device. We're taking advantage of that fact, and the AR/VR toolkit here will do some post-processing on that file after it's come through Model Derivative, and then allow it to be streamed into things like Vive, for example, or Unity. And so whether you're trying to do it through an AR/VR headset, or you're trying to do it through a Unity or Unreal game engine, it'll stream that data in there. And you might say, like, yeah, who cares? You can get data in there, through anything. The big difference here is that toolkit respects the model structure and metadata that is present in those models. So, for example, if it's a mechanical model or a building model that knows things about the assembly structure of that model or the floor structure of the building, and you want to be able to, in your AR VR experience or inside Unity or Unreal, you want to be able to say, hey, just give me the first floor of the building, or just give me this subassembly of this product. You can do that using the metadata that was published out of the Forge APIs. And traditionally, when you bring data into those applications, it's just a bunch of mesh and there's no intelligence to be able to do those kind of workflows. And those workflows can be interactive as well. So it's not like you have to worry about prepping the model for those. You can make the request into the toolkit to say, hey, just show me the first floor now, or hey, just show me this, these components that I want to see from that model. So stay tuned for when that'll be released into the sample kits. It'll be like an open source SDK that you'll be able to take and modify if you're trying to get content into any of these engines. And that includes the Microsoft HoloLens as well, by the way. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk a little bit about what we're doing in the manufacturing space. Now, this is kind of interesting. This is what we're kind of talking about right now, is trying to enable more of an integrated development experience for what we call mass customization. And so in the manufacturing space, we're getting a lot of customers that want to change the experience either for the way their customers get to learn more about their products, or the way that their sales teams approach their customers and help them understand how they can configure or buy their products. Even in some cases, this is around processes like estimation, trying to figure out, what it's going to cost to create a job. So for example, let's say you're building you're doing something where you manufacture sprinkler systems, and you want to be able to go into a building and figure out how you're going to configure that out. Or you're a customer that creates a consumer-based product, and you want to give a web experience for that consumer-based product where the customer can choose different options for your consumer-based product and get a configuration out at the end that you can actually manufacture. So that's the real difference here, is we're trying to build sort of a collaborative application experience that you can tailor towards what you're trying to build. Just to give you an example, you're going to have things like a full geometry engine available to build applications on top of. So that means that the geometry that comes out of this experience will be fully manufacturable. We'll have photorealistic engines available. We'll have it'll be an interactive 3D experience, and it'll be able to work on any device. It'll be more of a stack approach. So depending on your experience and your ability from to get access to development resources, the top stack will be a fairly simple drag and drop type of experience where, for example, if you're trying to build an application that might be a configuration of something that you're trying to sell, and you'd like that appear on your website so your customers can do that. You may have a drag and drop experience where you're deciding, what the UI looks like, bringing the model into that environment that you want the customer to actually configure, deciding what pieces of it they get to configure, and then publishing that up into your website. And that's kind of what we're calling that integrated development experience. The next level down would be more if you're a coder and you want to call directly into some of the services. You want to call into the data management engine, you want to call into the modeling engine, you want to call into the rendering engine, and maybe our machine learning engines and things like that. If you want to actually write the code and call into those directly yourselves, you'll be able to do that with this platform. And to give you an idea, actually, sorry, I apologize again. I had another video that I was going to show, and that is not working. So that API is under development today, or that toolkit is under development today, the Forge integrated development experience. You should see that starting in beta around the April timeframe, with a release probably in the second half of the year, but early in the second half of the year. And more information will be coming out that probably, like I said, in the April timeframe. The other one we're working on is our machine learning service. And the machine learning service, we showed this a few times at Autodesk University, probably starting about 2 years ago. And the idea here was, how do we take a look at analyzing 3D models and graphics without the ability to know what they are? So, you have some graphics, you want to analyze it, you want to identify its shape, and you want to basically tell people, hey, this is a nut, this is a bolt, this is a screw, this is a pump, and the main goal there was to be able to incorporate this into workflows where you weren't duplicating data and information. And so we had that as sort of a bunch of prototypes for a while, and now what we're developing it is a web service and a capability that will be in some of the Autodesk products. The first one we're going to start out with is the graphics service, but we expect to be adding other services to do different types of insights on different types of data, as we progress. The very first one that we have out there today is one that is going to be released in our Inventor products, and you'll see that upcoming this year. And what that will actually do is, if you're inside of Inventor and you own our Vault product, you'll be able to select on components inside of a 3D model and see if you have the same components already duplicated in your library. So one of the key workflows a lot of customers talk to us about is their engineers often design something or duplicate the design on something that they already have designed and already have manufactured, and they want to reduce that duplication. So this allows you to either go and pick on individual components and check to see if they are, if there's a duplicate already in your library. You can also, and by the way, those components could be in another model. They don't have to be an individual component sitting in our Autodesk Vault. It'll also let you go in and pick an assembly, and then it'll go and evaluate the entire assembly, and then again look in all of the models and component libraries that you have in the Vault and tell you, you know, what you've already duplicated, and let you substitute those back in for ones that you already have in your Vault instead of something that's been newly designed. So lastly, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of information about how you get access to any of the ones in beta. So remember, I talked about the betas for the Revit Design Automation API, the 3ds Max Design Automation API, and the Inventor Design Automation API. I talked about the beta coming out for our Forge IDX Toolkit. And I talked about the beta for the design graph service as well. If you're interested in any of those, you can use the forge.betas@autodesk.com email address, and essentially that goes directly to us, and we'll help you get the right information and give you some more timing on when those betas will be available. So I think we're open for questions now, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So yes, if anyone has any questions there, Sean's managed to get through his presentation quite quickly due to the video problems. So if people start typing now, we can start passing those questions on to Sean in a moment. Sean, I was wondering, do you have the videos not embedded in your PowerPoint? It might be possible if you displayed them outside the PowerPoint that they could work. Or
I don't. What I was going to do here is just see. I'm just going to play around for a sec here. Well, we see if there's other questions. See if I can, because they were working until I shared my screen for some reason.
Yeah. Okay. So we have some questions coming through, and there seems to be quite a bit of interest in the AR/VR toolkit. So one question is it possible to get a link now to the AR/VR examples GitHub repository? So the answer is no. We're actually still posting the code onto GitHub. At the moment, you can get access to the toolkit by going to the Autodesk beta portal, which is beta or beta if you're American, .autodesk.com, and sign up there and you can access it. But within a couple of weeks, that will be live on GitHub, and we'll actually be posting that information on the Forge blog, which is forge.autodesk.com/blog. Similarly, if you actually go there now, you'll find that there's a category on the blog for VR AR toolkit, and you can go in and find the current information posted about that. So the next question, I don't actually know the answer, is if the kit is available for Meta 2 or not. I'm afraid we don't have anyone on the call who could answer that very specific question. We have been working with the Meta team, so we do have some samples we've worked on. Just not sure if it's available for that version. Do you happen to know, Sean?
I do not. I do not.
Yes, Stephen.
Jim's back. Excellent.
Yeah, Michael Beal has spent time with the Meta folks. So if someone has a specific interest in the Meta, we should connect you with Michael Beal on our team and our contact at Meta to talk about what you're trying to accomplish. There is no reason the AR/VR toolkit cannot be used today with Meta, because I know Meta supports a Unity pipeline, and that's one of the code samples we have.
Yeah, and you can, if you like, you can email me and I'll pass that message on. So my name is Stephen Preston, so STEPHEN.PRESTON@autodesk.com, and I can type that in a reply later when we finish these questions. So another question, I was wondering about using the AR/VR API commercially, offering a service for a client that uses the APIs. The licensing terms for beta are not clear. Do you want to comment on that one, Jim?
I was just starting to write the text in, which is the AR/VR toolkit in the next week or two is being released as a code sample, and it's like any code sample. You can just use it, modify it, embed it in your code, do what you want. And again, the AR/VR toolkit being a code sample, then on the back end, your CAD models are fed using Forge into that AR/VR toolkit code sample. which we then have specific examples for example Unity, which I think 90% of the people building AR, VR experiences have Unity in their pipeline. And the AR, VR Toolkit shows examples both of feeding the information in kind of pre-authoring and at runtime. And I think the at runtime example is pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, so what else do we have? Yeah, I think normally our code samples we post under the MIT license. So I'm assuming we'll do the same thing again. Another question: can we have a presentation with the videos by mail? We'll look into posting the presentation, but definitely the presentation recording we'll be posting. We'll look into posting where we can post the videos or not. Do you anticipate any new functionalities combining BIM and GIS environment? Probably one for you there, Sean.
The BIM in the GIS environment. Certainly from, the main thing I would say there is that there's some research going on about BIM in InfraWorks, if that's the question. And
maybe let me jump in. We have 4 different discussions going with ESRI. Some of you may be aware Autodesk announced a partnership with ESRI at Autodesk University. And we're talking about integrations with ArcGIS, ArcView, and we'll see how many different Esri integrations we're going to do. Using Forge as a way to get building modeling information out of BIM 360 into the Esri environment. And we have in particular, we have one of Stephen Preston's engineers, Augusto Concalves, is kind of our expert in this area. If you have a specific need, let's get you hooked up with Augusto.
So another question from our friend Fernando Mallard. Hi, Fernando. Any Forge beta APIs to integrate with HFDM/Quantum? So that's really the app framework stuff and that Sean was talking about before. Do you want to expand on that at all, Sean?
Yeah, sure. So the IDX toolkit that I talked about, the underneath of that is the HFDM database. So that's the APIs that we're talking about going into beta around the April timeframe, and probably a couple months later we'll be releasing. So those will, that's the time frame for those to be released, and they'll be released as part of that kit to both get access to the modeling and rendering and visualization component, as well as the HFDM database itself.
Okay. And a specific comment, Sean, for you. So Froder is mentioning that when he imports Revit models with structural reinforcements into LMV, the models get extremely large because those structural reinforcements, basically the rebar, are each coming in as 3D objects, and there's huge numbers of them. So he's asking if you're planning to do anything to handle that.
Are these from Revit structure, is he talking about?
Yeah, I should probably jump in on this one again because I'm intimately familiar with it, having worked with the Revit product manager, Sesha Crotty. This is absolutely something the Revit team is looking at. The way rebar, steel reinforcement, is output by model derivative is a bit verbose because it's treating all the steel reinforcement as cylinders, which when you tessellate is a very large number of triangles, which creates performance issues. So the model derivative team that does the Revit translator is absolutely doing research, and there's an engineer working on how they could provide parameters so you could say how you want that reinforcement steel to come through, whether at a high level of detail like a cylinder, or whether maybe as a hexagon, where it'll have a much, or I should say hexagonal cross section. So it'll be much more compact. So, with the objective being, if you have tens of thousands of pieces of steel reinforcement in a concrete slab, you should be able to navigate that with the viewer, without the viewer choking. And we're absolutely committed to getting this one right, and I just ask for your patience. It's just taking us a little while to figure out the exact right approach.
And hey, Stephen, I think I might have figured out the videos. Is everybody seeing my screen right now?
I don't know. I'm not looking at the moment.
I can.
Yes.
I can see this.
Yeah.
I see your screen.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good, because the videos seem to be playing right now. So let me just go through a couple of those really quick. So this is the Webhooks video for those of you that still looking at the screen, and you'll see here, this is the sample app. So this is something that's available for you to code from. And in this case, he selects, you know, the events that he's interested in. He puts in the areas that he wants to notify. So this is the areas he wants to notify Slack, he wants to notify Twitter, he wants to notify Postmark of when an event happens. In this case, it was about the changes to that project. He's going to go in and he's going to make a rename of the actual directory and save that. Once he does, you'll see that the first thing that happens is notifications get sent out to Slack, and that Slack notification, it happens. An email gets sent through Postmark, so showing the text message that actually happened here through Twilio as well. And the email message will get sent through Postmark. So there it is. There's the email that actually got sent to his folder inside of Outlook. So that's a sample app that's available for you. If you want to do those kind of notifications, you can see how you can actually go ahead and build those. Let me go on and see if I can get these ones working as well. So this one is the Design Automation API. And so what this one's going to show, okay, maybe it's not going to work though. No, it's not going to work. That is so weird. One works, the other one doesn't. Yeah, sorry. So that was short-lived. There's something going on with Webinar and PowerPoint here that's presenting these from actually playing.
Yeah. Well, nice try anyway, Sean. So we saw one anyway. So here's we'll see what we can do about putting those exposing those videos somewhere online later.
Yeah, we should have them raw. I just don't have them in raw format right now. So
yeah. So here's another question. Are there any plans for using machine learning for doing automatic measuring in the model? This is highly needed for on-site usage with tablets.
For doing automatic measuring in the model, I would say we haven't thought about that yet. But the one thing we're trying to do is get ideas around what we should be doing with machine learning. So if if you have some ideas there, then please keep in touch on those, because right now we have in machine learning, we have a couple of different projects going on. There's an Insight one going on with BIM 360 right now. And then we obviously have the one going on around the graphic side, but we're looking for more ideas of where we should be applying that technology.
Yeah, and again, I've already posted my email address publicly in response to another question. So if you email me, I can pass your suggestions on to the correct person. So another question, is there any plan to support any cloud integration platform, for example, data connectors? So I think that's like the if this, then that, and Zapier, or all of that kind of stuff, Sean. Because obviously most customers don't use the raw APIs. A lot of customers do that webhook integration using these WYSIWYG configurators.
Yeah, so I would say right now we aren't planning on necessarily building direct integrations with those. We've got some thoughts about putting a UI on front of this that might help with some of that. And then I think the other thing, Stephen, is obviously we're building these sample apps, right? And those sample apps show how you can use some of those platforms as well. So that's probably right now the closest we're going to get. But whether we build an actual integration with either Microsoft Flow or Zapier or if this and that, we haven't decided whether we're going to do that or yet.
Okay, I think we're probably going into too much technical detail for this next question. So regarding performance and memory uses, are there any plans for using Octree streaming of the models? By doing so, one can keep streaming really large models, which is impossible by Forge right now. Do you have any comments on that, Sean?
Other than that, we're looking at ways to have better performance on larger models. No,
yeah,
but we are definitely focusing on trying to solve that problem. Whether we're using Octree streaming or that's up to the architects. But but they, that is a problem we are very aware of, especially when you get to the really big Navis models, is where we're seeing a lot of problems, or some of the really huge Revit models, and it is a problem we're actively working on right now.
Yeah. And actually, the AR VR toolkit is already doing some of this. So that's already dynamic streaming. So if you're, for example, streaming to your Unity application, it can, for example, only stream in the model when someone's actually looking at it, and you can then dynamically unload the model when someone looks away and it goes out of the line of sight. And level of detail and occlusion, line of sight, all of those things we're looking at with the VR toolkit as well. Okay.
I do see a question here about SharePoint. And it's a little short.
Oh, that was a follow-on to a question. Basically they're asking if we're planning to create formal integrations with things like SharePoint and other online services.
Okay, I just wanted to make
most of our samples, right?
Yes, exactly. We have one of our engineers, Adam Naj, has a lot of experience with SharePoint. He built a code sample for SharePoint with the viewer probably 2 years ago now. I don't know if it's up to date, but if you need a SharePoint code sample, drop us an email and we'll get Adam to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, and Jim, that might be just to cue off of that a little bit, so back to sort of the integration question. If there's another system you're trying to integrate with, and it's something that we can get ready access to and build a code sample to help people understand how to do that, that's something we've done quite a bit of, for customers that are looking at integrating with different systems. If it's a common system out there, then it's something we can get access to actually building on, and we've done quite a bit of that.
Yeah. So another question about optimizing the model derivative service, Sean. So, obviously some models, especially from Navisworks, are extremely large. So the question is really, are we looking at exposing any API options to allow any kind of simplification of those models, maybe, defining the level of detail that gets brought into a translation or mesh simplification and that kind of thing?
Yeah, great question. I'd say what we've mostly looked at right now is sort of the memory optimization side of it, and not loading stuff that we're not looking at. All of those kind of things is some of the work that we've done so far. The next level that we're looking at is just potentially what we load and how we load it. So that simplification that you talked about, we're trying to do that automatically versus forcing people to take action on it. So that's where a lot of the research is going in right now. You'll see some of the results of that in the BIM 360 collaboration application, where they've done some post-processing on the LMV files to be able to do that. But essentially, we're trying to do it so you don't have to do any work. So far, we haven't talked about putting APIs on that work, but it's not done yet. So I think once we get there, we'll see if it makes sense to actually add anything like that to it.
Yeah. So another question. Again, a lot of these questions are now getting into technical detail, so I'm going to cherry pick some of these and just ask people whose questions don't get addressed to just email me, and I can respond in more detail by email. But one question, I suppose this could apply more to the app framework. So the question is, to create a custom application for Forge, we need to deploy the apps to a server. So are there any plans to provide a scheduling environment for these apps with team features? So I'd say for the Forge APIs as they are now, well, no, they're just APIs that you use in your own application. So you really need to use the web deployment framework of your choice to manage the deployment of those applications. But maybe that's a different answer for app frameworks, Sean.
Yeah, it'll likely be a different answer for app framework, because it is more of a complete application, right? You're creating the environment, you've got all the services that you need there. Obviously, if you're adding some other capability or some other service into that workflow, then that would be deployed within your own pieces of it. But app framework will be more of a complete environment that we would actually have a deploy option within that.
Yeah, and there's a follow-on question for do we plan to provide a Heroku type environment? And again, for Forge APIs right now, no. but there will be that deploy option for the Forge IDX experience, won't there, Sean?
Correct, and any of the services that are part of that.
And the idea of IDX is that's the top level where it's almost for non-programmers, where you just drag and drop the components and hook up the business logic, and you have an application ready to go, and it's a one-button deployment kind of experience. So very much like the Heroku approach. But of course, for the current Forge APIs, you're hosting your own application and you're calling APIs which run code on Forge servers, whereas the app for Forge IDX side is actually covering that hosting component as well. Here's a good question for you, Sean. Can customers choose the location of their data in the Autodesk cloud services, Europe versus the US?
Yeah, today you can choose the location of your data within the Forge Data Management API. You can decide whether that data is in Europe or the US. And depending which one you choose, they're literally hosted in in either Ireland or here in the US. Those are the primary two geos that we are supporting for this year, and that capability is already there.
Okay. What else do we have? There's a couple of questions. I mean, just because a couple of people asked the same question, it is a detailed one, but people are asking about RCP files. So right now in Forge, we don't support point clouds, either through the model derivative service or through the viewer. We're working on point cloud support in the viewer, but that's a really hard problem to crack, displaying a point cloud in the viewer. So, and my understanding as well is a little bit of confusion, because an RCP file can be something from Recap Photo, which contains mesh geometry, or something from the Recap desktop application, which contains point cloud functionality. So an RCP that comes from Recap Photo, we can translate, but an RCP that contains point cloud data, we cannot translate. And the viewer does not handle point cloud right now. Do you have any information on the roadmap status of point clouds?
No. Unfortunately, I would say I don't have anything that's going to be some date in which we would support that. We've looked at it a few times. Like you said, it's a very difficult problem to crack to do it well, right? And
there are some workarounds if point cloud's important to you. As Stephen pointed out, using Recap, you can turn the point cloud into a mesh, which clearly works just fine with Forge, an OBJ file. But we also have some software components from Recap that will do things like translate an industry standard file format, like a point cloud format, like one of the LAS, or is it E57, into an RCP, RCS file, which may be what you're really looking for to pass it to someone that has one of our desktops, or again, using Recap to turn it into a mesh. So yeah, we don't have a simple answer to this one, but there are some options and some workarounds that may or may not meet your needs. So I encourage you to talk to us. And
we're getting to the end of the questions now, and we're getting to the end of the hour as well. So I just wanted to quickly share my own screen and just sort of show a couple of pieces of additional information where people can go to find out some more information. So let me just show my screen. So first of all, somebody asked, where do I find information on, let me just expand this so it covers the whole screen. Where do I find information on Forge IDX? Where can I find some more videos, or perhaps where can I see some of the videos that Sean showed and aren't available? And actually, if you go to forge.autodesk.com and click on the DevCon 2017 tab, you'll find here professional recordings of all of our Forge keynotes, and that contains some good overview information of Forge IDX and some use cases of how some early adopters are actually using that. So first of all, go there. The next place you can go is those are the keynotes, but we also have, if you go to the Autodesk University website and go to the online classes, you can actually select, as for the conference, Forge DevCon, and that shows you that gives you recordings of all of the classes that took place at Forge DevCon, including Sean's roadmap presentation, where we have a recording of the video.
With the videos working, yes.
Yeah, with the videos working, yeah. And also a couple of classes from the Forge IDX team as well, drilling into a lot more detail into the architecture of those applications as well. Make use of that material. That's some really useful information there. And you'll find, I don't know, if I search for Forge IDX, I'm sure we'll find something. Yeah, you see there we have a whole class on our HFDM and Forge app framework, which is, we keep changing the name for this thing, but either app framework or IDX. If you search for that, you'll find the appropriate classes. Another piece of information, for some of you who might want to, really kickstart your Forge development, we run a series of Forge accelerators around the world. These are normally 1 week, sometimes slightly less events, where you basically come to a location, normally an Autodesk office, and you work on a Forge related project during that time. So you're in an immersive environment away from your normal day-to-day distractions, with Forge API experts from my team sitting by your side and helping you get up and running. The prerequisites for those accelerators are that you've already gone through the online tutorials on the Forge website to understand the absolute basics of the API, because if you're spending a week out of the office, you don't want to waste a couple of days just learning the basics. So we ask you to learn the basics on your own. And then we also ask you to submit a proposal for your project. And the proposal is used for making sure that this is feasible, because we don't want you to travel a long way to an accelerator and on the first day find that the thing you want to do isn't possible. But it's also, in the event of us being overbooked, we use the proposals to select the most exciting projects, but generally we're not overbooked. So consider going to one of these. The next one is in San Francisco. These are free. You just have to pay to get there and pay for your accommodation and food when you're there. So next one, San Francisco at the end of February. Then we have one in Europe here, the end of March. Dubai. The Montreal one is dedicated, and actually this date is a little bit up in the air at the moment. That may be pushed back slightly. We're making that decision soon. But this is dedicated to that Forge app framework and HFDM and Forge IDX that Sean was talking about. And then Boston in the end of April, Barcelona in June, and then Australia in July. And then the final piece of information is just a reminder that the next presentation in this series is tomorrow, which is the Revit API, Civil 3D, and InfraWorks update, starting at 8 a.m. again. And a reminder that this one is actually split into two. So you'll actually see here on my schedule, I've got two classes. So the first thing is information we're allowed to make public now about these products. The second session, starting at 9, is information which can only be disclosed under NDA, and that's only available if you're an ADN member. So as an ADN member, to sign up for the second class, you need to go to adn.autodesk.io and go to the headline section. You'll see a link there for registering for that class. But everybody can come to this first class tomorrow, so hope to see most of you there. Okay, so with that was all the information I wanted to impart. Any final words, Sean or Jim?
Just sorry, I don't know what happened with the videos. They were working, but we'll make sure we get you guys access to those. And like Steven said, if you have any questions, just reach out, and we're happy to help you out.
And if you didn't have any questions, if you had questions that we didn't answer, as I said, please email me, and I'll make sure you get an answer by email. Sorry, you were saying something, Jim?
Oh, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. I know many of these people were here yesterday too, and yeah, as you and Sean said, keep the questions coming. We're here to get your questions answered. We recognize that with new technology, there's a bit of a learning curve, and a learning curve means uncertainty, and it can be scary. And when we've got a dozen Forge Cloud experts whose full-time job is to hold your hands, basically. Make sure you get the code samples you need, the explanations you need, to make sure you can get your first Forge-powered experiences up and get you through the steep part of the learning curve.
Yeah, and of course a big thank you to Sean as well. Thank you, Sean.
Absolutely, Sean.
Yeah. And so Vero, could you stop the recording now, and then